And so the assumption that's operative here is that this sense that we feel is incorrect, and that we ought to somehow get around it, avoid it, circumnavigate that void so that we can get back to being, whole and complete and happy. Well, that approach actually begs the question, because it assumes in the very approach itself that the void is a sort of alien intruder that isn't supposed to be there, that is some sort of, temporary hurdle that we have to clear, right? And when you read a lot of, if you read or listen to or, interact a lot with kind of back in the day it was called the emergent church, nowadays you can call it sort of evangelical, deconstructed kind of movement. They talk a lot about doubt, they talk a lot about ambiguity and uncertainty. Peter Enns, Old Testament scholar that I really appreciate, he wrote a book called The Sin of Certainty. I've got a book in my bookshelf by, I think it's by Boyd. It's called something like Benefit of the Doubt, or something with the word doubt, some play on the word doubt. There's often a sense that this doubt, this unknowing or agnosticism, right? Gnostic in Greek means, gnosis means knowledge. The alpha privative before it, agnosis, without knowledge. You hear a lot about this, in the sort of evangelical, deconstructed sort of culture. But there's a distinction that I want to draw that I think needs to be made, and I think that some people don't really appreciate this or haven't truly reckoned enough with this sense of void, this lack that I'm talking about. And that's the distinction between epistemological and ontological unknowing, or epistemology versus ontology. Epistemology refers to knowledge, right? How we know things. Ontology refers to the study of being, who we are, okay? Now, a lot of people would say that this sense of unknowing, this lack, this void, this ambiguity is purely epistemological, right? In other words, it's not constitutive of reality, but it's just a temporary, hurdle, right? It's a temporary impediment to where we want to get to. And so, and this is sort of reflected in, I think, a lot of the new atheists and a lot of sort of the kind of, Newtonian way of looking at the world, that the world is explicable in principle. We just can't explain it all yet, right? Everything is knowable. Everything can be broken down to its constitutive parts, this microphone, this desk, this camera. It's all just made of particles, and if you take it apart and strip it down to its most basic elements, the whole is just the sum of its parts, right? The world is knowable. It's just a matter of time and tech. Once enough time goes by, and once our tech catches up to where we want to be, then we will actually know everything there is to know, because the world at its core is knowable. So that's sort of embracing the void, but on a purely epistemological level. What I'm talking about is deeper than that. And that's why a lot of this is stemming from a movement from the mid-20th century called radical theology, because the word radical, it's not just like youth pastor radical, like, the teens with a Z, we're going to teach them some radical theology. It's not that. Radix in Greek means root, right? So the English word radical literally, etymologically refers to when something is striking to the very core, to the very root, right? So this void, this ambiguity, this unknowing, is not just epistemological. It's not just that we're like, yeah, we don't know everything yet. We still got to figure some stuff out. But it's ontological. In other words, it's constitutive of the nature of reality itself. That this void, this sense of lack, this antagonism, this ambiguity, this unknowing, is part and parcel of the world. It's woven into the fabric of reality itself. okay? So it's not something that is a temporary setback that will eventually figure out how to neutralize and circumnavigate, but rather it's something that is built in, it's inherent, okay? It's built into the very nature of reality. And once we get to the death of God and the cross of Christ, I'm going to be able to tease this out in much more detail. So this lack, this void that we're constantly trying to avoid, which, by the way, and I'm going to get into this in part 3, is it's the very message of evangelicalism. And most evangelistic crusades, concerts, rallies, whatever, they all share this same idea. Hey, you're feeling this. Hey, you're feeling this sense of longing. You're sad. Your relationships are messed up. You're in financial trouble. You're depressed. You're addicted. Whatever. You've tried sex, you've tried drugs, you've tried alcohol, you've tried money and power and fame, you've looked for the solution everywhere. Well, you're looking in the wrong place. Jesus is the solution, right? And the underlying assumption there is that seeking to avoid the void is correct, you're just doing it wrong. And that is the message of almost all evangelistic endeavor, at least in this country. And I'm going to get in our next talk, I'm going to tease this out more and seek to unpack this and show where this originated, because this idea that you can avoid the void if you just push the right buttons on the vending machine, that idea's origin might surprise you. But to just wrap things up now, what I want to point out is that this void is built in, right? It's not avoidable. It's supposed to be there. And maybe the message that we need to be proclaiming, maybe the message, not just proclaiming, the message that we need to assimilate, that we need to wrap our minds and hearts around, is that the problem perhaps is not the void. The problem is that we're seeking to avoid it in the first place, right? And so that is what I'm going to seek to tease out in the upcoming installments of this series, that perhaps the solution, perhaps Exile's answer to empire, is not to just erect a new empire under a new name, but perhaps Exile's response to empire is to free us from the claims of any imperial strong theology. Perhaps what conversion is, not to get too far ahead of myself, but perhaps what conversion is not converting from this to that, right? Not converting from alcoholism to being addicted to CrossFit, or conversion from being a sex addict to watching 18 hours of TV a day, right? Yes, one of those might be more healthy than the other, but the grip with which you're holding this new obsession is just as strong and just as tight, right? But maybe conversion in this paradigm that I'm seeking to set forth is conversion from the need to convert at all to anything.